The story of American independence did not burst forth in a single dramatic moment. It unfolded slowly, painfully, over months of heated debate, quiet despair, and growing certainty that the old ties could no longer hold. By the spring of 1775, the Continental Army had been born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. George Washington arrived on July 2 under the great elm near the Common, and took command the next day. The force he inherited was almost entirely New England, 11,500 from Massachusetts alone, with smaller contingents from Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. They flew their own colony flags, answered to their own officers, and had fought under Artemas Ward until Washington stepped in. In the weeks that followed, 3,000 more men marched in from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, including Daniel Morgan and his riflemen, tough backwoodsmen who could, it was said, split a squirrel at 300 yards while moving at double quick. These arrivals brought together men whose names would soon echo through history. Daniel Morgan himself was a giant of a man, Welsh by descent, raised in the rough country of New Jersey and Virginia. He had survived 500 lashes from a British officer in his youth, and walked away defiant. Later, in a savage fight with Indians, he took a musket ball through the neck, believed himself dying, yet still managed to ride away clinging to his horse while the tomahawk of his pursuer whistled past. Morgan was uneducated, rough-edged, but clear-minded and utterly loyal. Beside him stood Benedict Arnold Young, dashing, generous in impulse, fearless in battle, yet already carrying the seeds of vanity and self-interest that would one day destroy him. And there, too, on Cambridge Common, walked a man destined for an even greater role, George Washington. Tall, reserved, dignified almost to severity, he had come north not seeking glory but duty. He wore no splendid uniform, only the plain blue coat of a Virginia colonel, yet every eye turned to him. The soldiers sensed immediately that this was no ordinary general. He spoke little, but when he did, men listened. He demanded discipline, yet showed genuine care for the welfare of the lowliest private. From the beginning, his presence steadied an army that had been stitched together from local militias. Through the summer and fall of 1775, the siege of Boston continued. The British held the town, but they were trapped. Washington wanted to attack, but powder was scarce and artillery even scarcer. Then, in the bitter cold of March 1776, Henry Knox accomplished what many thought impossible. He dragged 59 cannon captured at Ticonderoga 300 miles across snow-covered mountains and frozen rivers to the heights overlooking Boston. When the British woke on March 4 to find Dorchester Heights bristling with American guns, General Howe knew the game was up. On March 17 the Redcoats evacuated, sails filling as they slipped out to sea, leaving behind a city that had not surrendered, but simply refused to be starved into submission. Yet even as Boston was freed, the larger question burned hotter than ever. What now? For 11 years the colonies had protested, petitioned, boycotted, and fought, all while insisting they remained loyal subjects, seeking only their ancient rights. But the coercive acts, the bloodshed at Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill, the burning of Falmouth and Norfolk, the repeated rejection of every olive branch, these had worn away the last illusions. Independence was no longer a radical dream whispered in taverns. It was becoming a necessity recognized in broad daylight. In January 1776 a slim pamphlet appeared that changed everything. Thomas Paine, an English corset maker turned excise officer turned journalist, had arrived in America only 2 years earlier. Common Sense sold more than 100,000 copies in weeks, an astonishing number for the time. Paine wrote in plain, forceful language that ordinary people could grasp. Society in every state is a blessing, he began, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. He tore into monarchy itself. In England a king hath little more to do than to make war and give away places. which, in plain terms, is to impoverish the nation. Most devastatingly, he argued that America had outgrown its parent. "'Tis time to part." The pamphlet swept through the colonies like a prairie fire. Farmers read it aloud in taverns. Ministers quoted it from pulpits. Even those who still hoped for reconciliation found it impossible to ignore Paine's logic. By spring, the mood had shifted decisively. In Virginia, Richard Henry Lee rose in Congress on June 7 and moved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. The motion passed, but not without fierce debate. John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, author of the Farmers' Letters, still pleaded for delay. Robert Morris and others feared the consequences. Yet the current was too strong. A committee was appointed. Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, John Adams of Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, Robert R. Livingston of New York. Jefferson, only 33, was chosen to draft the document. He worked in a small room on the second floor of a brick house on Market Street, writing at a portable desk he had designed himself. For 17 days he composed and revised, drawing on Locke, on English legal tradition, on the resolves of countless town meetings and colonial assemblies. Franklin and Adams made small but crucial changes. The result was a masterpiece of clarity and moral force. On July 2, 1776, Congress voted for independence. 12 colonies said yes. New York abstained, waiting for instructions that would arrive too late. The next 2 days were spent debating Jefferson's draft. Some passages were cut, most notably his fierce condemnation of the slave trade, but the core remained untouched. On July 4, the Declaration of Independence was adopted. "We hold these truths to be self-evident," it began, "that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Governments," it declared, "derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. When a government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it." After a long catalogue of grievances against George Roman III, ending with the charge that he had plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people, the document closed with a solemn pledge. "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." News spread slowly by horseback, by sailing packet, by word of mouth. In New York, on July 9, Washington had the Declaration read to his troops. The soldiers cheered, then pulled down the leaden statue of George Roman III on the Bowling Green and melted it into bullets. In Boston, church bells rang. In Philadelphia, the Liberty Bell tolled. Across the ocean, Englishmen who read the text felt a chill. This was no mere colonial protest. This was a new nation speaking its birthright. Not everyone welcomed the news. Loyalists, perhaps a fifth of the population, were horrified. Many fled to Canada or England. Others stayed quietly, hoping to ride out the storm. Yet for the great majority, July 4, 1776 marked a point of no return. There would be no easy reconciliation now. The war would go on until independence was secured or until the American cause was crushed. 11 years earlier, James Otis had argued against the writs of assistance. 9 years before, the Stamp Act had united the colonies in resistance. 6 years earlier, the Boston Massacre had hardened hearts. 3 years earlier, the tea had gone into the harbor. Now, after all the petitions, all the bloodshed, all the suffering, the question was no longer whether the colonies should be free in spirit. It was whether they would stand as one sovereign nation among the powers of the earth. The men who signed that parchment knew the risk. Benjamin Franklin turned to John Hancock as they affixed their names and said with his characteristic dry humor, "We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately." Most of them would face years of hardship, exile, loss of fortune, even death, yet none recanted. As one South Carolina judge later declared from the bench, a decree is now gone forth not to be recalled, and thus has suddenly risen in the world a new empire, styled the United States of America. The revolution had begun in earnest. The war would be long, brutal, uncertain, but the ideal had been proclaimed to all mankind, that free people could govern themselves, that governments exist to secure rights, not to grant them, and that when those rights are threatened, the people have the right and the duty to rise up and build something new. That summer of 1776, under the hot Philadelphia sun, 13 colonies ceased to be colonies. They became something unprecedented, a nation founded not on blood or conquest, but on an idea. And the world has never been the same.